When you are looking at your total daily energy expenditure to determine how much you need and how much of a deficit you should be in, you want to avoid online TDEE calculators. And one of the reasons is that they are going to grossly overestimate the amount of calories that you need to consume. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be explaining how many calories you need to consume based off whether your goal is to either maintain your weight, lose fat, or build muscle. But real quick, before we start, I'd just like to add this little disclaimer that if you are somebody that has struggled with an eating disorder in the past, or if you are currently battling an eating disorder, then I would not recommend that you use the strategies that I'm going to be sharing in today's video, because a lot of the advice that I'm going to be sharing in today's video can mimic symptoms of eating disorders. So rather than focusing on things like weight and calories, I would rather have you focusing on incorporating healthy habits. And in fact, I actually made a video a few months back. It was called Lose Weight Effortlessly, One Habit at a Time. I'm going to include a link right up over here if that is something that you would like to check out. So if you do have an eating disorder, or if you have had one in the past, you'd be much better off watching and using the information in that video instead. And this video, you can still watch it for educational purposes, but you would want to use this information at a later date and time once you've got a good handle on your eating disorder. But anyway, let's get on to the topic at hand. A few days ago, I was in the Discord server of Obese to Beast, aka John Claude Van Damme, and there were several questions with regard to calories, particularly figuring out your maintenance calories and how many calories you need if your goal is to lose fat and to build muscle. So those are going to be the questions that I'm going to be answering in today's video. Because these questions were not asked directly on my channel, I'm not going to be sharing the usernames or any personal information just to keep their privacy. Normally, I would share their usernames, but because it was not asked on my channel, I am not going to be giving away that information. This first question has to do with maintenance calories, and it states, "Hey, good night. I'm new around here. A bit about myself. I used to weigh about 270 pounds in February. I started a strict diet from then till now, and I've made it down to 181 pounds. I've spoken to some instructors at the gym, and they said it's good weight to start gaining lean muscle. However, I still have fat. I know in order to go about this properly, I'd need to count my macros and eat at a maintenance calories. I've checked it online and my maintenance is about 2,800. I'm thinking about eating at 300 to 400 calorie deficit from that and implementing whey protein in my diet. Would this promote fat loss over time? Of course, I would be doing cardio with every workout. Any help is appreciated." Well, one thing with regard to this right over here is when you are looking at your total daily energy expenditure to determine how much you need and how much of a deficit you should be in, you want to avoid online TDEE calculators. And one of the reasons is that they are going to grossly overestimate the amount of calories that you need to consume. And one of the reasons why it's going to overestimate it is because when they ask you for your activity level, they're very, very broad with their definition of what you do for exercise. And a lot of people are going to overestimate their activity level. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm 5'9", I weigh 158 pounds, and I'm roughly 10% body fat right now. And right now, I train every single day. And when I say every single day, I mean 7 days a week. I don't take any rest days whatsoever. If I were to fill out one of those TDEE calculators, I would list my activity level as sedentary, because even though I am training 7 days a week, aside from my training, I am incredibly sedentary. I basically just pace around my studio, and the only real activity that I do aside from lifting weights is putting my clients' weights away and bringing them back to them. So I don't really do a ton of activity throughout the day. Now, if I were to go on tdeecalculator.net and put in all my stats, when I put in sedentary, I get 2,116 calories, which is roughly what I consume throughout the day. Right now, my calories range from 1,600 to 2,400, which puts me at an average of about 2,000 calories per day, which is what I would get if I put sedentary on the tdeecalculator.net. Now, when you go to fill out your activity level, they're not very specific. They have sedentary, light exercise, moderate exercise, heavy exercise, and athlete. For sedentary, that's basically a desk job. For light exercise, they count that as 1 to 2 training sessions per week. For moderate, they count that as 3 to 5. Heavy exercise counts as 6 to 7, and then athlete counts as 2 times per day. So because I selected sedentary, again, 2,116 is my calorie maintenance. If I were to go with heavy exercise, which is by their definition 6 to 7 workouts per week, which is exactly what I do, then that would put my maintenance calories at 3,042 calories. So if I were to go on a maintenance calorie of 3,042, I would be putting on roughly 1 pound of fat every every single week because it is grossly overestimating the amount of calories that I need. So one thing worth noting is if you are going to use these TDEE calculators, make sure that you are not overestimating your activity level. If you are somebody that trains a lot, but you're generally sedentary when you're not training, then I would not classify you as a heavy lifter or a moderate lifter. I would put you in the sedentary class. That is going to be a much better reflection of your activity level throughout the day. Another thing is, rather than using these TDEE calculators, the most accurate way that you can determine how many calories you need is going to be through trial and error. I don't care who you are. You could be the greatest coach on the planet. The first few weeks when you are working with any new client, there's going to be trial and error. You're not going to be able to just get it right off the bat. If you do, you lucked out. But generally, you're going to need a few weeks to kind of determine how exactly everybody is going to respond to their different caloric requirements. When it comes to trial and error, the things that you want to do, number one, you want to weigh yourself on a daily basis, and you want to take an average of that weight. The reason that you are weighing yourself on a daily basis is because if you just do one weigh-in, your weight could fluctuate from day to day. So you want to be able to get an average of at least a 1-week plan. That way you could get an idea of what your normal weight is throughout the course of a week. Once you've done that, then you need to estimate what your total daily energy expenditure is. If your goal is to maintain your body weight, a general rule that I use with my clients is 12 to 14 times their body weight as their starting point for calories, and then adjust accordingly. So the woman in this post, she said that she weighed 180 pounds. 180 times 12 to 14 would be roughly 2,160 calories to 2,520 calories, which is a lot less than the 2,800 calories that she got when she used the TDEE calculator. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot. It's almost 300 calorie surplus, but that 300 calories, if you are trying to lose weight, and she said that she wanted to incorporate a 300 calorie deficit, well, if she incorporates a 300 calorie deficit, then best case scenario, she's going to maintain her weight because she's going to be eating at a maintenance. But really, remember, it's going to be anywhere from 2,160 to 2,520. So she may even gain weight if she incorporates the amount of calories that the TDEE calculator is using. Now, another thing is you want to adjust accordingly based off how much weight you are either gaining, losing, or if you are staying the same. With regard to weight adjustments, if it is your goal to lose weight, when somebody comes to me for weight loss, I like to see 0.5% to 1% weight loss per week. So for this woman right over here, because she weighs 181 pounds, on the high end, she would not want to lose more than 1.8 pounds per week. So if she is going on a specific calorie target and she is losing more than 1.8 pounds per week, then she would want to incorporate more calories so that she's not losing too much weight, because 1.8 pounds a week for somebody that's 180 pounds is going to be very, very manageable and sustainable. When you start losing too much weight, it can become very unsustainable and you could end up binging later on. But I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a couple seconds, because the next question has to do with weight regain and binging disorders. This second question states, can anybody tell me why after nearly 8 months of being in a calorie deficit, I never binged once, and in the last 3 months, I couldn't stop binging? I thankfully lost a bit over 60 pounds in those 8 months, but now I gained 10 pounds back. I really don't know how to stop binging. I really thought that I finally, after 10 years of struggling with eating disorders, am binge free, but no, this would have just been too good to be true. What should I do to stop binging and losing the weight gain? Any suggestions? And there wasn't a whole lot of information in terms of what the weight currently is, what the calories she was consuming was. So I asked some questions and she followed up giving me a little bit more explanation. And she basically said that she was binge free for almost 8 months. Her highest weight was 98 kilograms, which is, I believe, around 215 pounds. And she was consuming between 1,200 and 17 calories. For the first 6 months, she was doing 30 minutes of cardio, 30 minutes of full body workouts, and she's now training about 3 days a week, but now she's only doing cardio because she doesn't have time to weight train. Now, with regard to this particular woman right over here, one of the things that you want to do is avoid large calorie deficits. This woman right over here weighed 215 pounds when she started, and she was consuming between 1,200 to 1,700 calories. Now, for somebody that is 215 pounds, that is ridiculously low for their calories that they are consuming. And one of the things that you want to avoid if you are trying to lose weight is going on these really large calorie deficits, because you can get this rebound effect. I made a video a couple months back, and it was called "You Need to Eat More Calories to Lose Weight." I'm going to include a link right up over here if you guys want to check that out. But basically, one of the things that I explained in that video is if you are somebody that is trying to lose weight and you go on too big of a calorie deficit, your body is going to secrete the hormone ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone, and it helps to regulate your appetite. And one of the things with regard to ghrelin is if it's elevated long enough for a long enough period of time, it is going to cause you to crave high calorie dense foods. And another thing is ghrelin has also been linked to poor decision making. So if you do go on a very high calorie deficit, what's going to happen is your levels of ghrelin are going to be elevated. That is going to cause you to crave high calorie dense foods. And because it's linked to poor decision making, it is going to make it incredibly easy for you to want to go out on a binge and just binge on all the foods that you've been missing while you were on your calorie deficit. And now that we know that, the next question to ask is how much of a deficit is too big of a deficit? Well, this is going to differ from person to person because everybody's going to be a little bit different. Some people can tolerate a much higher deficit. Some people can't get away with a very big deficit at all. So there's going to be a lot of trial and error with this one as well. As I stated earlier, when people come to me for fat loss, generally I like to see 0.5% to 1% of your weight loss per week. So if you are somebody that you are going on a calorie deficit and you are losing more than that 1%, then you would want to adjust your calories accordingly and add in more calories. So if you are somebody that is 200 pounds, ideally 0.5% to 1% would be 1 to 2 pounds. So if you're 200 pounds, you would want to see 1 to 2 pounds of fat loss per week. If you are losing more than 2 pounds of fat, then increase your calories a little bit because over the long run, it's going to be much more sustainable and your levels of ghrelin won't be elevated too high and it's not going to cause you to go out on a binge. Now, this is just a general recommendation. Some people, even at only 1% weight loss per week, that's still going to be too much. So if you find that you are still very, very hungry, losing 1% of your body weight, then drop it down to 0.5%. If 0.5% is very easy and manageable, then try 0.6%. If that's easy and manageable, try 0.7. Keep doing that until you find the sweet spot where you are not struggling and it is very, very easy to sustain that type of caloric deficit. And then the third and final question has to do with maintaining or losing fat while simultaneously building muscle. And this question is, if he wants to maintain and gain muscle mass though and is very active, wouldn't a smaller deficit be more efficacious? I just ask as weight loss is not his only goal from what he has said. Well, with regard to gaining muscle and being in a caloric deficit, I made another video a few months back, and this one was called Fitness Myths Debunked. You can't build muscle and burn fat at the same time. I'll include a link right up over here if you do want to go a little bit more into detail, but the basic points of that video are when it comes to building muscle, there are two requirements. One, you need some type of external stimulus, and the second requirement is that you need an adequate amount of protein. With regard to an adequate amount of protein, how much protein is that? Well, it is going to depend on the amount of calories that you are consuming. Generally, your protein requirements are going to come in a range from 0.8 to 1.5 times your body weight. So depending on whether you are trying to lose weight, maintain your weight, or build muscle, that is going to dictate whether you need to be on the lower end of that range or the higher end. Basically, when it comes to building muscle, you need your muscle protein synthesis to exceed your muscle protein breakdown. And when it comes to muscle protein synthesis, if you are in a caloric surplus, your body is naturally going to be in a more anabolic state. So when you are in a caloric surplus, your protein requirements are going to be a little bit lower. Whereas when you are in a caloric deficit, your body is going to be in a more naturally catabolic state. So because you're more catabolic, your body is going to need more protein if you want your muscle protein synthesis to exceed your muscle protein breakdown. So when it comes to protein requirements, again, 0.8 to 1.5 times your body weight is going to be the general range. One of the things worth noting is if you are somebody that's of relatively normal weight and you are fairly lean already, then this would be really good guidelines for you to follow. However, if you are somebody who is severely overweight or if you have very, very high percentage of body fat, then these protein requirements wouldn't really be applicable to you, because rather than focusing on protein for your body weight, focusing on protein relative to your lean mass would be more beneficial. Let's say you are somebody who is 500 pounds and you are trying to lose fat while simultaneously build muscle. Well, if you are 500 pounds, 1.5 times 500 is 750. You do not need 750 grams of protein if you want to build muscle and lose fat if you are 500 pounds. So let's say you are 500 pounds and you are 50% body fat. Well, that means you have 250 pounds of lean mass. So rather than using 500 pounds as your 0.8 to 1.5, using the 250 would be a much better starting point. And even at that point, that would be a lot of protein for you to consume, but that would be a better starting point than using your overall weight. Now, with regard to determining protein requirements, if you are trying to maintain your weight and build muscle, then roughly 1 time your body weight of protein is going to be adequate. If you are in a surplus, then you could get away with even less, something like 0.8. And then if you are at a caloric deficit, it's going to come down to how big of a deficit you are in. The larger the deficit, the more protein you are going to require. So let's say that you are in a very small deficit. You're only in a 100 or 200 calorie deficit. Then you could get away with 1.1 or 1.2 grams per pound of body weight in order to build muscle while simultaneously lose fat. However, if you're in a very large deficit, let's say you're doing something like a 7, 8, 900 calorie deficit, then getting closer to that 1.5 times your body weight in grams of protein would be more applicable for you. So your protein requirements are going to be very dependent on the amount of calories that you are consuming throughout the day. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.